And we're back, students. It's another episode of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. It's Lakers Fast Break University and Lakers History 101. So please find your seats, students. Find your seats. Make sure you're got everything up front. You're all ready to take notes because today's lecture will be on the doomed season for the Lakers, the four-peat that never was, the four-peat that should have been in 2003, 2004. Absolutely. So, unfortunate times for the team as it started off so well. And the Lakers we were actually, I'm sure, fans around that time. I know I was. I was already counting, one, two, three, four. Four rings looking good. Yeah, right in a row. Absolutely be looking good. Right there in the trophy case. Because the way they start off like gangbusters. Out of any of the seasons in those early 2000s. They started off the best in 2003, 2004, but it all went awry due to injuries. You thought, hey, they've got Hall of Famers left and right. You've got Phil Jackson. You've got the glove, Gary Payton, Karl Malone, Shaq, Kobe Bryant. What could possibly go wrong? Well, a myriad of things, unfortunately, after a great start, went wrong. And unfortunately led to a team that is considered by many to be one of the best teams never to have won an NBA title. And here today to talk about what's going on with this team as far as Lakers History 101, three esteemed members of the Lakers Fast Break University are here with us today. First up, first man here, it is, of course, the guy behind Lakers History 101's greatest lectures. It is the guy behind Ox 1947 at LakersBall.com. Also as well, Simblades with a Y.com. It is, of course, Joe Soro, Professor Joe Soro, indeed. Professor, when you look back upon the year 2003, 2004, the season per se, what really comes to mind? Because for me, it's about what should have been, what could have been, but ultimately what wasn't.
Well, unfortunately, the season was marred by Kobe's Colorado incident
Mm-hmm.
and the excitement of having Gary Payton and Karl Malone wasn't on par to what happened today with the Dodgers. But I remember there was massive buzz because everyone was surprised that Karl Malone took the minimum
Yeah.
and Gary Payton took the mid-level exception at that time. And they were both there during the press conference, just answering every question, and you could just feel the buzz in the room. And then they started that year 18-3, and they shellacked the Spurs. Really, really good. I think it was late November, if I remember correctly. And I remember it was a funny play that happened where Tony Parker was supposed to call a timeout. I guess he didn't see Pop calling a timeout and ended up going to the hole and just doing one of these acrobatic, terrible layups and hit the rim. And then Lakers ended up going on a quick fast break and getting a score. And then obviously a timeout got called. I remember I was watching that game thinking, man, Spurs are toast. The Lakers are going to they're going to get revenge from 03. This would have been the 4 out of 5 title, not the four-peat. The four-peat was the year before. Kobe's situation didn't affect Kobe in a lot of ways. Kobe was able to harness himself enough to where he could still perform. The thing that killed us, or I should say killed the Lakers, was Scott Williams falling on Karl Malone's knee. That changed the path for the Lakers that season. If
the trajectory, so to speak.
Yeah, if Karl Malone does not get hurt, they have a little bit more firepower. The problem with Gary Payton in the finals was he was getting destroyed by Chauncey Billups. He couldn't stay in front of him and was getting called for fouls pretty much every other play. But Phil Jackson put Derek Fisher back in, who was playing pretty much on one leg. Fox was rendered useless at that point. Horace Grant, same thing. We had to start Slava Medvedenko once Karl Malone finally succumbed to his injuries. And then, of course, the game, what was it? Game 4, Shaq had one of it. He was on pace to have an all-time great game, and Kobe shot the Lakers out of the game in that game. And Kobe admitted to this, that he cost the Lakers the title in 04. And I believe him. It was his worst series of his career. And the unfortunate part about that season is not winning. I would not have minded if Shaq had left either way, but winning it was important. And unfortunately, they just couldn't muster enough chemistry or muster enough between Kobe and Shaq to care enough to win that series. They were too busy thinking about themselves. And it's that series that I finally realized that Kobe Bryant was never going to be Michael Jordan. That was the season, that was the series that told me that that was going to be tainted, because I really believed he was. Losing in 03 wasn't as bad as losing that series. That even though it would have been nice to win in 03 to get a 4-peat, because no one does that. The only team that ever did that in the NBA was obviously the Celtics. And then as far as hockey in recent memory was the Islanders. But that year just kind of put a sour taste in my mouth about the whole situation. And it also cost the Olympic team the gold, because Kobe was going to play in the Olympics that year. And of course, dealing with what he was dealing with, he decided to pass, and we saw what happened there. So just an overall bad year with some really great games. Kobe's last regular season game in Portland, tearing Portland's heart, ass, arm, leg, brain out in consecutive last second shots in the fourth and in overtime. I unfortunately did not see that game live. I watched it on my update on my phone. And I remember seeing on my phone when it got refreshed, they won by 1. And I'm like, how the hell did they get a 3 with 1 second left? And then I saw the highlights and I saw what happened. A lot of great games, a lot of memories of that year being very, very good. But unfortunately, it was marred by Kobe's court case, and of course Shaq and Kobe not just hanging on for one more series together and winning it enough, or playing well enough together to send out Shaq with a title. And that series changes both players' careers. And I have mentioned this several times because it's a subject I always like to bring up. Kobe and Shaq losing their 2 finals. Kobe losing in 04, Shaq losing in 04, Shaq losing in 95, and Kobe losing in 08. Those are defining losses. The losses that change places at the podium. If Shaquille O'Neal wins in 95, which he was favored to win, wins in 04, which he was favored to win, Kobe in 04, favored to win, 08, favored to win, their careers are different. I still say to this day that if Kobe wins in 04 and 08, he has 7 titles and he's sitting next to Jordan. Shaq is sitting next to Kareem, probably maybe even more, as the greatest center in NBA history. You can have an argument at that point. And that's what I think about when I think about the 04 season. It's that one year that kind of made me realize that I do hate losing more than I love winning.
Once again, it is Lakers History 101. It is the doomed season of 2003-2004. And also here today is a good man indeed. He is the madman from Toronto. He did get out of Toronto traffic to go ahead and conduct class today on the 2003-2004 season that wasn't. Ultimately, after such a promising start, it is the Magic Man, Sean Grice. And Sean, Unfortunately, like Joe said, so many things worked eventually against the Lakers, including a masterful game plan by Detroit as far as the way they schemed against the Lakers. But we'll talk about that later in the program as far as how that was set up. Your thoughts, though, as you were watching the season progress, or I should say digress, in regards to the Lakers. Still, even after all those transgressions with Kobe, the falling out was starting to happen between Shaq and Kobe. You could see it happening in the news as far as articles in the locker room, the comments being made, the drifting starting already. The Lakers still dominated a great portion of that season, including overcoming Karl Malone's injury. Your thoughts on the season that was in 2003, 2004?
Yeah. For all our Argentinian fans of the Lakers fast break and of the Lakers,
And we do
Joe,
have a few.
yeah, Joe Soro does not speak for us. Argentina deserved that 2004 Olympic gold medal. As a matter of fact, as history serves, the United States didn't even make it to the gold medal game. Argentina defeated them in the semifinals before they could even get there. Secondly, that was a big signature season for a lot of Kobe moments, Gerald, and good ones. Not I realized Eagle, Colorado is a big part of that season. I happen to think of the best Christmas Day game the NBA ever had. Unfortunately, we were on the losing end of that one, but it was the most entertaining one, and they had built it up effectively from seemingly the day of the trade. It's almost as ESPN was teasing that all summer long, and obviously clinching the 18th division title, which was important back then. I mean, this is 20 years ago when division titles meant something. You actually had home court for something like that. So that was important. And on the last day of the season, as well, two buzzer beaters. Like when I think of Kobe's best buzzer beaters, I think of those two at the top, along with Phoenix, and obviously going left with the D Wade. They're in my top four. Yeah, it was a season of untapped championship season, Joe. However, I will say this: at that point in time, the West was starting to come on a little bit. Unfortunately, there was nobody really strong enough to take on the Lakers. They basically cruised until they got to the finals. It's just a lot of what ifs in that season. That's why I kind of don't like talking about it, because it's a lot of what ifs.
Once again, it is Lakers History 101 here at Lakers Fast Break University. It is Professors Magic Man Sean Grice, Professor Joe Soro as well. It is me, the Dean of University Studies, Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much for watching and listening. But also here today, excellent man indeed. I wish he was here more often for our classes. He actually asked to be here for this specific class. So please, as a man who knows the scene that's going on back then and now for the Detroit Pistons, but also as well as an ardent Lakers fan, it is an esteemed member of the faculty. Indeed, it is Professor LRob. LRob, great to have you here, my friend. Let me ask you this: the memories of 2003, 2004, it started off so well. It started off so strong for the Lakers. What went wrong, my friend, in your eyes, in this season that was ultimately a four-peat that was ultimately not going to be?
It
Well,
was not a
Gerald,
four-peat. It was 4 out of 5.
Well, I like to say four-peat.
It's not a four-peat, though.
yeah, the Spurs were the defending champions. So Joe is right. Thanks for having me.
I like four-peat there better. Sounds better.
Yeah, I don't this season.
4 out of
Yeah,
5.
being
Okay.
a native Detroiter this season, hurt a little extra special. It's nothing like having Pistons fans going at you on a daily basis, and oh man, bad memories. But basically, it's no country for old men. It's the theme of that season. The Lakers got, you know, a major coup, one of the first super teams when they got Payton and Malone to agree to come. Like Joe said, I think one of them got the, you know, minimum, and the other one took a mid-level exception. And everybody was ready to hand the Lakers the title. You know, Karl Malone was 40 years old. I mean, people forget that because he was such a great physical specimen. Similar, probably in build to George McGinnis. Now that I think about it, so
rest in peace.
Rest in peace, Big George. But yeah, Malone was just such a great physical specimen in such great shape that even at 40 years old, he was still a good player. But you know, guys break down at that age. And Malone, who had been an Iron Man his whole career, I don't know, Lakers got out of the gate fast. You know, probably was 20-5, something like that. Some great record when Malone.
It was 18-3. Yeah, Joe said that was just really a gaudy record.
Yeah,
LRob.
I mean they were cruising, and when Malone got hurt, they still held it together. Still ended up second, I think a game or two behind Minnesota for second place in the conference. But it was hard to recapture that magic, I think. That's probably the big thing, was the Malone injury kind of hurt the trajectory of the season. And like Joe said, the bigger one, I was always a big Gary Payton fan. So when the Lakers got him, I was happy for him and wanted him to win the championship. But I mean, he was undressed in the finals, and he was one of the few times you see a great player lose his confidence. And Billups and Rip and those guys got into him, and he got to the point where the Pistons would pack in the paint, and GP wouldn't even shoot it. I mean, he would not. He took 28 shots in the finals in 5 games. Think about that. He took 5 shots a game. He would not pull the trigger. And of course, Kobe was ridiculous with his shot selection. The Pistons had length with Tayshaun on him. They crowded him. They pushed up on him, wanted him to go to the basket. And when you went to the basket, you had the Wallace boys back there waiting on you at the hoop, and it was very hard to finish over those guys, even for Kobe. I mean, the Pistons was a great defensive team. You know, let's call it like it is. And Lakers, people, we all remember Kobe shooting woes. But when you think about that series, no one on the Lakers could buy a basket. I mean, Shaq was dominant. Shaq was Shaq. And like the guy said, he had that one game where he was 16 out of 20 and was just killing them. And then, you know, Lakers, Kobe specifically wouldn't milk it and wanted to, you know, make sure he got his shots off. But no one on the Lakers. Let's see, Kobe shot 38%, Fisher shot 30%, Devin George 39%, Payton 32%, Malone 33%, Slava 35%. They didn't have one player shoot over 40% in the series except for Shaq. You're not beating a good team like the Pistons. Malone.
Well, they also, Larry Brown instituted a hard double on Kobe.
Yeah,
he does something that a lot of people don't remember, or a lot of teams did not do to scheme against the Lakers. They would always double team against Shaq. This time, Larry Brown decided, you know what, Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace, whatever, whoever's down there with Shaq, you're on your own. I'm going to double team Kobe out front, and that was something that the Lakers and Phil Jackson did not eventually scheme or overcome, because it seemed like that, you know, they threw this out at Kobe, LRob. It just seemed that like they couldn't ever figure it out throughout the entire series, how to figure it out.
Absolutely. They let Ben check him one-on-one. And of course he was no match, as good a beat defender as Ben Wallace was. You know, that was suicide. And Shaq was like you say, barbecue chicken. He was killing them. But Wallace was out hustling them. Shaq was killing them scoring wise, but Wallace was all over the boards and making, you know, steals and defensive plays, doing Ben Wallace things. So He had a very good series as well. Probably one of the things that people don't remember about that year, and me being in Detroit, I remember vividly, the Pistons were on like a 5-game losing streak. They were flailing. They were in trouble at the trade deadline. Portland trades Rasheed Wallace to Atlanta. I think he played 1 or 2 games with the Hawks. They released him. 1 game with the Hawks. 1 game, Sean. They released Wallace. The Pistons ended up picking up Rasheed. Up until then, yes, they were a very good team, but they couldn't figure out how to get over the hump. And when they got Rasheed, I think they went like 20-5 or something like that over the rest of once he got put into the starting lineup after a couple games. They went on a tear, holding teams to under 70 points, and they just became a dominant team. I think Boston made a trade to help that trade, or somehow Boston got their hands involved with it to help the Pistons out, and of course hurt the Lakers. And maybe that was payback for us getting Michael Thompson in '87 right at the deadline. I think one of them picked up Lindsey Hunter, and then they released him, and the Pistons got him right back. I mean, every move they made right at that deadline. They gave him Mike James, so they had this very, very deep team with Mike James and Lindsey Hunter, attacking guys on defense coming in with the second unit. They were really good, but yeah, a lot of things fell their way right at the All-Star, right at the trade deadline, and made them put them in a real good place.
Joe, let me ask you this: when it comes to maybe something that could have been done differently or schemed out differently by Phil Jackson, we often call Phil Jackson one of the greatest head coaches in the history of professional sports. I mean, he has the resume and pedigree to do it. I know a lot of people, that are out there that are Phil Jackson haters. They talk about, oh, well, he only won because of Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Kobe, and Shaq. When it comes down to it, when Phil Jackson has won, he's won gloriously. And obviously we've seen his success ratio from that. But when it comes down to it, do you think in your mind, seeing how the season played out, is there anything that Phil Jackson might have done differently in your eyes? Maybe that could have, yielded a different result? Joe?
At that point, Phil Jackson had probably had enough of Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant was getting to that stage where he was stubborn, and being that he was involved in the situation he was in exasperated that. The fact that Shaq was coming up on his last season's contract and wanted more money, and that summer Shaq in a preseason game pointed at Dr. Buss and said, "Pay me, mother effer." And I remember thinking about that, going and starting to dislike Shaq at that point. And Phil, at the end of the season, he came out with a book called The Last Season, a team in search of their soul. I think that's what it's called. Yeah. And he did things in that book that I wasn't in agreement with. You don't talk about what's going on in the locker room. If you want to say Shaq, broke a door or stuff like that,
I still think it was too fresh. Don't you?
It doesn't matter if it's too fresh. I'm not a big fan of that's a private moment. That's for the team to keep indoors. If you want to talk about fun things and you've got that, here, I'll give you this. If you've got the blessings of the players, then that's a different story. But I think there were some things there that I don't believe he should have talked about. He had, I think Phil had kind of thought that Kobe was maybe guilty, and he made it maybe not abundantly clear, but there was that notion there. It's kind of like Jamie with his assessment on that whole situation.
Yeah, don't get us started on that, because I got a whole lot of hate mail on that.
Well, it doesn't matter at this point. The point is this, no one knows really what's going on, and I don't like when people think they know what's going on. I know that there was stuff written and read, but we don't know. And that's
one way or the other. Let's just make it fair. One way or
the other. You don't know. And that's something I'm very adamant about in real life. Were you there? No, then shut the F up. You weren't there. If you want to believe it, believe it. If you don't want to believe it, it doesn't matter. You don't know. And that's the point. I would like to look back on that year. If that incident doesn't happen, I don't think the team is in turmoil. I mean, I almost look at that season as, look at what they went through, and they still made it to the finals. It's pretty phenomenal in terms of the talent and the execution that year. Imagine if Kobe didn't do what Shaq, he kind of threw Shaq under the bus on an interview with the cops, and that created the rift there. There's just a lot of stuff, a lot of emotional stuff that went on, and until the last series, they were professional enough to continue to do what they needed to do, but they just couldn't finish it, and the bodies said no. Again, losing Rick Fox, not really having a fresh Derek Fisher, Horace Grant not really being able to play, having to start Slava Medvedenko. It was a recipe for disaster, all in one at the worst time, playing against a team that reminded me a little bit of the '89 Pistons, in that they were struggling up until the deadline, and then they made the trade for Rasheed Wallace. After, I think Rasheed Wallace was in Atlanta for like 2 minutes, and then they got Rasheed Wallace. Back in '89, the Pistons were struggling before the deadline as well, and that's when they decided to trade Dantley for Mark Aguirre. And Mark Aguirre doesn't get enough credit for taking his ego. I mean, Mark Aguirre had a huge ego. But the fact that he's the one that offered to come off the bench and let Dennis Rodman start, that was like a wrap. Once he did that, the Pistons were likely going to win the championship in '89, and they did. So the two Piston titles in '89 and 2004 had selfless players be selfless at the perfect time against two Laker teams that were decimated by injury in both those series. And I go back and forth on those two series a lot in terms of the hate of losing, because the Lakers were on their way to a three-peat, a way to send Kareem Abdul-Jabbar out a champion with his 7th title. The Lakers would finish the '80s with 6 titles and a three-peat. But unfortunately, the hamstrings on Byron Scott and Magic Johnson did not comply. And then, of course, in '04, we had the similar situation with Karl Malone, and then really the mainstays like Rick Fox and Derek Fisher not being healthy. It's just, it never goes away. The disdain never goes away, because it made the .4 shot irrelevant. That's probably the biggest bummer, if anything, in terms of that season. Like, you had this '04 moment. I remember I was in Vegas. I was there for the Roy Jones Jr. Antonio Tarver 2 fight, and I was bouncing back and forth during the undercards to watch the game. And then finally, when Antonio Tarver and Roy Jones start walking to the ring, it was right when halftime started, so I had some time to kind of like, wait it out. And then, of course, we all know what happened. By the way, that is the greatest sporting event I've ever been to in my entire life, or at least the feeling was the greatest. When Tarver hit Roy Jones Jr. At this point, Roy Jones Jr. was Mayweather of that time. When he hit him with the left, I heard this and this. And every single ass in that arena stood up at the same time and went, "Oh!" And you could feel 18,000, 20,000 people just, And then, of course, Roy Jones was out, didn't get up, and I jetted out. It was in the middle of the 3rd quarter, and that's when the Lakers start separating from the Spurs. This is Game 5, by the way, after .4. And then at that point, guys, when whoever won the Spurs Lakers series won the title. So I was extremely excited that night, knowing that the Lakers were going to win 4 out of 5, not a 4P. What the hell are you laughing about?
Just Magic Man, just enjoying the chat. Let's go ahead.
You
Say
laughing
Yeah.
for 5 straight minutes? What's so funny? I'm reading what's there. I don't see anything funny.
Magic Man, let me ask you this though, bringing you back in, my friend. When it comes to what you saw, the game plan by Larry Brown. Larry Brown, I know he gets maligned all over the place as far as his vagabond nature, about him hopping all over from team to team to team to team to team to team. But I think this is his one, or his probably his best coaching job I've ever seen him do. I don't know if you guys will agree with me or not, but it's my evaluation that's the way he set out these guys. None of them were at an elite level ever in their careers, in my opinion. Some of them were very good, a lot of very good players. Some of them even made the Hall of Fame. But I never would consider any of them at an elite level as far as in the upper echelon, as far as the levels Kobe and Shaq or Karl Malone or even Gary Payton, achieved at the height of their careers. So that being said, he found a way to scheme against the Los Angeles Lakers and worked against them, the Los Angeles Lakers in those finals. Tell me about what your thoughts are and how, that finals progressed once the Lakers and the Pistons met in the NBA finals.
Well, Gerald, in obviously hindsight and retrospect here, it was kind of like that particular finals was kind of a mushroom cloud for one era, sprouting another one. I think in the late 70s and early 80s, the ABA brought in the 3-point shot, and then the NBA adopted the 3-point shot. And players like Larry Bird, players like Kiki Vandeweghe, players like Michael Jordan used the 3-point line as a weapon, and coaches like Doug Moe use it for the entire team. Different eras create different styles, and in the early 2000s, illegal defense was phased out eventually, and they were going to phase out hand checking. But it's kind of funny, Gerald. What was the last finals that featured hand checking?
I would assume it'd be one of the Jordan related ones, would be my guess.
No, it'd be the Lakers and the Pistons. That's the last season that hand checking.
You could also say the
allowed.
Lakers and Celtics, as far as and then that's probably because that series was so physical.
Well, one thing that the Pistons obviously don't really get credit for, and they really should, is that they used the rules at the time to their advantage when they were being phased out. So that was a great question you asked. Could Phil Jackson have done anything else? No, not based on the personnel that the Pistons had and the rules in which they were able to use that length to impede drives. As LRob said, as Lee said, they were fine living with Shaq and going against Ben and Asheed. They were fine with that. It was impeding drives because they knew, other than Kobe, Gerald, there wasn't really any Lakers on there who could drive. I mean, God bless him, Devin George tried, but I mean, he wasn't really a threat. And you have Tayshaun Prince, who's 6'9", long as a pterodactyl. I mean, with the ability of them to bring those doubles and hand check, there was nothing the Lakers could do. It was, at that point in time, it was a talent issue and a scheme issue. There's nothing that Phil could have done differently that would have changed the outcome of that series. Now, if Karl Malone is healthy, and I don't know, maybe Kobe has a couple different looks. Maybe it goes to 6, maybe. But Detroit had the right personnel to be able to shut down that offense. Joe, remember, this is a team that had 20 games in the playoffs where they held their opponent to 45% or less shooting as a team. So there was rarely two guys who could heat up against them. They usually were fine if one guy did. Two, be really hard pressed to find it because that defense was smothering. After they got Sheed, they didn't allow, I think, more than 100 points. I think less than 3 or 4 times, Gerald. I mean, they were really stalwarts.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, my friend.
So,
bring it back. Go ahead.
and I will say this, I think you're right about Larry Brown's job with them, although I think he had less talent on that Sixers squad that made the finals than this Detroit team as far as defensive personnel.
But he didn't get the job done. This time he got the job done. He laid out a game plan, and you can see the way, even if you just look at the box scores, when Shaquille O'Neal scores 36 and the team itself only scores 80, like they did in game 4, the Lakers only scored 68 in game 3. Yes, they never reached 100 points at any time in the series. That tells you right there just exactly how good the defensive lowdown was for Larry Brown. But if I may, I'm going to bring it right back to you in a second, Magic Man. But let me get LRob in here. LRob, you live in the Detroit area. You're familiar with that community as far as how they felt about that team. But as a Lakers fan in that area at that time, or just basically understanding of that time, excuse me, what are your thoughts as far as how the Lakers were to you in that finals, but also as well, how was the community in relation to, as far as how were they accepting of the Detroit Pistons of that era?
Yeah, they really, the Pistons believed they had beat a very good Indiana team. Tough series. Of course, I root for the Pistons when they're good, but then when they get to the point where they can challenge the Lakers, I usually go the other way and want them to lose. So at that point, I definitely was not. I was hoping Indiana could take them down. I think it was 2-2, and Rasheed guaranteed they win the next game. That's when Reggie Miller had a layup to probably win the game, and he doesn't dunk it, and Tayshaun chases him down, blocked the shot. Indiana wins in 7. Pistons had a lot of momentum coming into the finals, and they had a belief. They had a strong belief. I worked with their PA guy, Mason, is a radio guy. So I worked with Mason for like 18 years. Very, good friends with him. So when he started doing that Detroit basketball thing, then, oh man, I mean, the whole arena would rock. And, when I'm at home watching the game, before the game, my sister's taunting me, Detroit basketball. Like, I gotta hear somebody else say this. So the Pistons, I mean, they were, they weren't spoilers like the Lakers. The Lakers, we expect to win. The Pistons knew that they would have to bring their A game and bring it to the Lakers. And, and rereading some of the stuff in 2004, Rick Fox said the Lakers didn't have a respect for the Pistons. He talked about how they thought they would steamroll them, how Phil tried to warn them, saying, hey, guys, this Detroit team is going to be really tough, and it doesn't seem like the Lakers, took heed to it. So, that was a really good team. Like you said, they didn't have any individual great players. Rasheed Wallace could have been a great player if he wanted to. I mean, he had all the skills and all the tools, but Rasheed was content to be a number 2, number 3 guy. He never really wanted to be the best player, even though he had the skill set to do it. And he was probably the most talented person. Ben Wallace was just a grinder. He was a worker. Rick was fit good into their system, and Chauncey was coming into his own, hitting the big shots. So it was kind of perfect timing. But they had a real deep bench. Memo Core, they had Corliss Williams, and they had Eazy-E was even playing hard from our Laker days. Elton Campbell, like I said, Lindsey Hunter, and those guys coming off the bench was playing tough. Pistons had a tough team. Coach Ham, was on that championship team. Darvin Ham, Larry Brown. If Russell Westbrook had Larry Brown as his coach early in his career, he would be a much better player today. He made Chauncey Billups a real true point guard, and he would demand it of him. You know, he wouldn't let those guys go out and just do whatever they wanted to do. He was a great coach. He had a lot of success with a lot of teams. You know, he was on those Denver teams, like I think Sean mentioned, when the NBA merged, and the Nuggets were one of the best teams coming from the ABA. That was Larry Brown with David Thompson and Issel and Bobby Jones and those guys coming over. You know, he had Indiana playing at a good clip with those guys he had over there. He had even when he was with San Antonio, David Robinson and Terry Cummins and Willie Anderson and young Sean Elliott. You know, every team Larry Brown went to until he got, you know, a little too old. I think he kind of passed them by, but he pretty much maxed the talent on that team. So, but you can only, you know, like a lot of great coaches, that stuff grates on you after a while. And I think somebody like Larry Brown has a expiration date. You can take it for a little while, then after a while, it's like, look, we're tired of this. So I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah.
No, you did. You did a great job. Absolutely. I was trying to get a feel of what it was like.
Detroit was crazy. It was one. They were outside of the Lakers hotel, this fancy hotel in Birmingham, and you know they were making a ruckus all night. You know, all night, just doing Celtics type stuff to the Lakers, so they couldn't get to sleep. You know, out partying and making noise outside the Lakers hotel to 3 and 4 in the morning. There was reports of that. So it was crazy. It was crazy times.
So, Magic Man, let me bring it back to you, and then I'll bring it back to Joe. Once again, it is the Lakers Fast Break. Lakers History 101, Lakers Fast Break University. Welcome, class, students. I hope you're taking attention, because if you're not taking notes, it'll affect your outcome on the quiz. But Magic Man, or on the finals before winter break, absolutely. Let me ask you this, Magic Man. When it comes to what we saw with the Pistons, when I look at that roster, as LRob said, he rattled off a number of names that, while they may be forgotten about by many in NBA lore, that's a good rotation. And I think the strength in numbers is probably the reason why they ended up winning and being so dominant. Just the defense, the strength in numbers. Because when I look at that roster, I see defender, big guy, muscle, defense. I don't see a lot of shot making. I see enough with Richard Hamilton. They didn't need a whole lot when it came to shot making. They just were bruisers. They reminded so many people of those bad boys Pistons era. I think that, to me, this team, again, strength in numbers, I think, was a key for them in their rotation, Magic Man.
I think you'd have to say that as well, Gerald. You know, and let's be frank here. Of that playoffs, Gerald, do you think that the Lakers provided the Pistons with their toughest test?
I don't want to say that yes, because obviously the numbers don't appear to be that way. I mean, the Lakers could barely muster, at one point in time, they couldn't even muster 70 points in one of those games. So, some of their Eastern Conference series looked like they were a little bit better contested than what the Lakers offered.
Yes. Yes. This again, LRob kind of mentioned it. They had a tough stretch there before they turned it around.
The Nets series was particularly close. That went to 7 games.
Of course, it went to 7 games. That's what I'm saying. They were battle tested already. They had the metal for it, and I just think that there was a belief there. So that series to me was the toughest one that they had to get through, and it was hard fought, and championship teams have a little dirt on them, Gerald, and get a little bit muddy. I mean, you talked about Lindsey Hunter. Lindsey Hunter was on a couple Lakers championships in the early 2000s. So, I mean, that's a guy who's battle tested. I just think that it was the right team with the right scheme, with the rules changing just enough where they could take advantage of it. It just seemed that all the confluences of a river allowed the salmon to get out into the ocean, Gerald. They didn't have to get worried about dying.
So I ask you this, Joe, when it comes to this team in Detroit, the most surprising thing is, yes, I talked about the strength in numbers. I talked about the quality of rotation players they had. This was despite the LeBron James draft. Now remember, LeBron James was a rookie in this year, Joe, but drafted right behind him was one of the biggest draft busts that the Detroit Pistons actually ended up drafting, yet not needing, and still won a championship with, in Darko Milicic. Just imagine they could have had their chances with Carmelo Anthony, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, a number of names on that list down below could have even served them better. Yet they didn't get it done in the draft, but they certainly got it done in the NBA Finals, Joe.
Joe Dumars cost the Pistons at least a back-to-back title by not drafting Carmelo Anthony. And I find it comical that some folks, even NBA players, said that Carmelo Anthony on that team would have thrown things off a little. I started laughing. I said, thrown things how? He played for Jim Boeheim. He had just won an NCAA championship. He's going to come into an environment where he's a rookie, and he's going to be the best scorer on that team on a consistent basis. The 2005 Spurs do not win the title if Carmelo Anthony is a Piston. It's that simple. In 2006, the Heat beat the Pistons. You know, maybe they might actually go to the finals 3 years in a row. So, boy, did he botch that. Now, if I was a Pistons fan, I'd still be irate about that. But I don't care what anyone says. You want to give credit to the Pistons, fine. That's fine by me. I think it's warranted. But I refuse to believe that a prime Shaq, even though he was getting ready to get out of his prime, he should have won the MVP in 2005.
Well, a fully healthy Lakers team with guys in the right mindset would have been different.
You have Shaq and Kobe on your team. You should be able to figure it out, especially against a team like the Pistons. This wasn't the Tim Duncan, David Robinson team, or you're not playing against Jordan and Pippen. This was probably the best role player, non-Hall of Fame player in my book on the team. I know Ben Wallace made the Hall of Fame, but I have completely different criteria for Hall of Famers than the Basketball Hall of Fame does. But that team was a team full of role players that won a championship in a freak situation, and it just happened to be against the best modern day center and the best modern day, well, I should say at that era, shooting guard. And that's what makes the story weird, is you beat Kobe and Shaq at their peak because the mental part of the game wasn't there. Too many distractions. Yes, injuries played a part in it, but I would like to think that if you have Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant in their primes on the same team, I believe they should have figured it out.
Your thoughts exactly, LRob, or do you have something different in mind when it concerns what happened in the NBA Finals?
Pistons were the better team. Kobe, Phil, most of the Lakers would say, I mean, yes, Kobe shooting them out of it, that was a problem. You asked, could the Lakers do anything differently? I don't know how they did it. Could have done anything differently. They switched Kobe on Chauncey. That slowed up Chauncey a little bit. But then rips start going off. Chauncey said that, they would just call a pick and roll. It didn't matter who was guarding them. They'd call a pick and roll, draw Shaq out in the paint, and whenever he got a big man on him, he would start dancing. And we couldn't corral him. But Kobe just talked about, to him, they just didn't have that chemistry that when they faced the Larry Brown team in the finals in 01, his teams were tough too, but the Lakers were such a well-oiled machine at that time. They could go to that third, that fourth, that fifth option on the triangle and still execute and defeat them. Against the Pistons, he said once the first option broke down, they just weren't a cohesive enough group. And I would say probably a talented enough group. You know, you talk about Kareem Rush as your number, 2 guard off the shooting guard off the bench. Devin George, I think he was a very young player. Lakers just didn't really have that depth. They were top heavy. Once GP got taken out of the game mentally, and Karl was slowed down, they did not have a good enough team to beat the Pistons. It's a team game, and they just didn't have a good enough team. So no, I don't lament that too much. It's hard when you're getting beat by 20 points. I mean, they, like you said, they didn't even score 70 points one game. They got blew out 88-68.
Yep.
They couldn't make a shot. Rick Fox was injured. He was at the end of the road. He's injured. I mean, they picked up Brian Russell. He couldn't play any longer. I mean, who do we have that was going to combat them? The Pistons were deep and tough. They were running 10 dudes out there who all could play. And we're running Kobe and Shaq. Fish, he struggled a little bit, couldn't hit shots. He emotionally said it was a tough season for him because he had gone from, hey, I'm a 3-time champ, and now I'm coming off the bench. GP fought it himself. He said, hey, I should have been more aggressive. And he kind of let the triangle trying to run the system, but he felt he should have been more aggressive. I agree. He more than anything, it was him and Kobe. Kobe being too aggressive and GP not being aggressive enough. He was the only person with the talent I thought that could compete with the Pistons, and he didn't step up in that series. So I was happy to see him redeem himself and get a ring with the Heat a few years later. But he was the guy, and just goes to show, as good as you are, when it's somebody else's time and you're going up against a young, talented player, which Chauncey Billups was, you don't care about how many All-Star games you have or your accolades. That he just couldn't compete, and he just got discouraged. I mean, we've seen it in the San Antonio series. Did they bench him in that San Antonio series when they got down 2-0? I mean, that was the first red flag. We went down 2-0. I remember, I think Phil took him out in the clutch. I don't know if he benched him again, but I know he took him out, and GP kind of lost it. And he came back. He redeemed himself a little bit, but Tony Parker was having his way with him.
GP was getting burned by Tony Parker the first 2 games. And then what happened was they adjusted, and GP started posting him up and beating him up in the block. And then anytime Tony Parker got to the basket, he was getting shellacked by Shaq.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's the part, guys. That's the part that I know Karl Malone was healthy in that series, healthy enough to kind of combat Tim Duncan. He did a couple of magical chairs on him, and he really held his own against Tim Duncan. And that's the point, guys. That's the point we're getting at. I think that the Lakers should have adjusted at some point. If they were able to adjust to San Antonio and win 4 straight, they should have.
Remember, Karl got hurt too.
Yeah. Once Karl got hurt, I think that was.
Karl got hurt. When did he get hurt? Late in game.
So when they did take the ball out of Kobe and Shaq's hands, who was delivering? Because as Rob, that was also I thought obviously a misstep by Kupchak, not realizing that you needed somebody else on the perimeter when a long team. But you know what, Gerald? He might have been looking for that player and not found him. But at the same time, the Lakers still had draft picks to play with at that point in time to upgrade. And looking at the rosters now, you would have thought that they definitely would have tried something, because there's nobody else on that team that would have been able to Because the same thing happened in the Celtics series, Gerald, except there was no hand checking. Tibbs doubles were a little more sophisticated and exotic, but other than the hand checking, he took the ball out of Kobe's hands, impeded his ability to drive to the basket, and nobody else was able to score. It was kind of a play. There was kind of a playbook for how to guard Kobe and the Lakers after that.
I'll tell you what, though, a lot of memories from that season. Go ahead, LRob. You wanted to go ahead and
Yeah, no, I just took a quick peek because I remember being frustrated with when Chauncey and those guys went to whole Shaq. I mean, he did not have a good defensive series, as dominant as he was on the offensive end. He had a total of 3 block shots in the series. A total of 3 block shots. He'll get on TNT and he'll roast, Anthony Davis and those guys and say, hey, I'll give you 30 and 20 and, but Shaq had 3 block shots in the finals. So, yeah, I mean, nobody on the Lakers team was without blame. Kobe, gets the lion's share because to whom much is given, much is required. He gets the lion's share. He was terrible, bad shot selection. Next was GP. He got roasted, taken out of his series. Can't count on any role guys, so I don't give him much flack. But Shaq, he got outplayed by Ben Wallace. So some of those games, Ben was just out hustling him, and he was everywhere. And it's like, Shaq, pick up your energy, dude. You're getting 10 rebounds and 3 blocks. Come on.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, LRob. I when the discussion of Zion Williamson came up about being out of shape, and Shaq started talking, I was like, I would have stayed away from that with Shaq. I know Shaq had a much better career, obviously, but Shaq left a couple titles on the table because he wanted to eat and party more, right?
And then Shaq did say, hey, Zion, I'm talking to you from a position of someone who knows I was in your position, so take it from me.
I still wouldn't have said anything.
And the loss itself.
Shaq and Charles, not exactly the 2 most physically, fit athletes. Yeah. So.
This is true. Yeah, them giving advice on that subject is not, I don't know. It's hard to take sometimes, especially.
I agree with Samurai Beast. By the way, welcome. I think this is the first time I've seen you. I actually remember watching several plays where Chauncey Billups was he just would move and he'd get a foul called on. I mean, it was.
Oh man, yeah,
it was not. It was one of the few one-sided officiating series I've seen. Similar to Game 2 against the Celtics in 2008, where
as Alice has pointed out, with the free throw disparity as far as that's concerned. So.
I forgot what his first name was. Poe turned into Charles Barkley.
Leon Poe.
Yeah, that officiating can really just like in the NFL. They were NFL-like calls that decimated the other team to the point where their mental focus on playing defense was rendered useless because they didn't know if breathing on somebody would have been a foul call. It's the worst finals loss of my 3 finals loss as an adult viewing. 89, I wasn't old enough to really kind of understand what was going on. I have vague memories of that series. There's just a couple clips on TV, so I don't really count the 89 and before that. 91, 100%, 04, 100%, 08, obviously. And 04 by far was one of the just absolute heartbreakers because that it would have been nice to have 4 out of 5 and Shaq go to Miami as a champion, a 4-time champion, and Kobe go into the next phase of his career with a 4-0 finals record. And it ends up becoming a 6 no, I wasn't actually.
He was only 275.
I was quite skinny actually growing up. I ate a lot of Mediterranean food, so I didn't eat it. I didn't eat macaroni and cheese until college, by the way, just so you guys know. But anyways, the sixth championship changes everything. Shaq's fifth championship changes everything if they win that series. Obviously, if the Lakers win in 04, the Lakers are up one title right now. There's so many things that a team loses. There's so much history that changes when you lose that damn series. So much. The difference between Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James is those finals losses.
And this finals loss led to a parting of the ways as far as the disparity between Shaq and Kobe, the bitterness, the feud, whatever you want to say. It's just did not make things better. It only made things worse. And we saw what came out of that. But that's another tale and another class for another day. But it is the Lakers 2003-2004 season. I want to thank Professors LRob, Joe Soro, and Professor Magic Man Sean Grice for being here, for attending class today, and being able to give you the lecture on the 2003-2004 Lakers, but also as well a big shout out to you students from all of us here, the faculty of Lakers Fast Break University. It's Gerald Glassford, Dean of University Studies here at Lakers Fast Break University. Tomorrow we'll be back. San Antonio once again on the docket. We'll go ahead and bring you the usual pregame. And of course, join us during the game, playback.tv/Lakers Fast Break, and also as well the post game. The best post game for the Lakers, there's no better around than right here. I've got some things I want to say, especially about some emails that have been sent to us here recently as well. So got some things to say about that on tomorrow's show. So for Joe Soro, LRob, and Magic Man Sean Grice, it's Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much for joining us, class. But it is truly appreciated that you join us here at LFBU. Class is now dismissed.